Book of Philippians, chapter 4. But before we do, let me ask Mabel, will you open us in prayer, please? Oh, sorry.
Father in heaven, we thank you, Lord God, for another opportunity to come into your presence, Lord God. We thank you, Lord God, to be taught your word, Lord God. We pray, Lord God, that what we learned tonight will stick with us, Lord God. We thank you for traveling mercies, bringing us all here safely, and for those who are still on the way. And we thank you for traveling mercies on our return trip home, Lord God. We thank you for our pastor, Lord God, who has a willing heart, Lord God, and desires that your saints should learn the word of God. And is willing to open a church so that we can have Bible studies. We thank you, Lord God, that we can freely study your word. We know, Lord God, that there is a time coming when we will not be able to freely come to church, freely study your word, freely read the Bible, Lord God. But we thank you for this time, Lord God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, let me give you an opportunity if you have any thoughts, questions, encouragements, insights concerning Sunday's sermon with the guilt and despair and ultimately suicide of Judas, and then of course the wickedness of the Jewish leaders.
Still strikes me that just the hypocrisy of not taking back the money that they gave him. And I just think it's like, and then they stand on all these ceremonies, but the weightier things don't bother them. Like murdering someone, paying for someone to be murdered, actually going into a Gentile's house. Now that's bad. Taking back money that you bribed is bad, but giving the money is fine. It struck me as how we, and I think we do that in our own sin, where we kind of twist everything, and it's just sad, how sin like just corrupts and destroys our minds.
Yeah. I had a quick thought. I'm sorry. I had a thought too that we said in awe, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that they betrayed Jesus. That he, meanwhile we do when we sin.
Yeah.
We too turn our backs on him, but we find it's like crazy that they did that and they knew him, but we do too. So it's
Right.
convicting.
Right, Mike.
I think it was really deep when we thought about like Judas and how there's a worldly sorrow that leads to death. But the godly sorrow leads to repentance. And we got to be very careful about how we mourn over our sin and how it brings us closer to Christ and we trust in his salvation instead of the failures.
Yeah, and I think that's why I said when I said that only Matthew records Judas's suicide, and Matthew puts Peter and denying Jesus and weeping bitterly, and Judas back to back, and I think it's to show us godly sorrow and worldly sorrow, what it looks like, what is just guilt and despair, and what is genuine repentance. So, Dan?
Yeah, I wrote down here in my notes, remorse looks at the consequences of sin, not the sin itself. It's almost like, the worldly sorrow, it's almost like if you're not found out, you're good. You know what I mean? But the fact that you're found out, either somebody sees you or even in your own mind somehow you realize something about it after the fact, that's when the guilt comes in. It's not that you did something wrong, especially that you did something wrong against the Holy God. Like that doesn't enter into it at all.
And that's why I said, the difference between those two kind of sorrows is life and death. It really is.
I thought of a few things that other people have said. What Mike said about the worldly repentance versus just a true repentance in his heart. But he knew it was an innocent man, and it was so sad for me to hear him, like when you was reading it, to hear that he said, I betrayed an innocent man. He didn't want the money that you brought up was so valuable to him. It was all he wanted before this all transpired.
Is it not
And-
true that when
and
you,
then
when
now
you're in
he
that
didn't
state,
want
it
anything to
becomes
do with it.
disgusting to you all of a sudden?
Yeah.
The thing that caused the hurt? You know?
So
Yeah.
sad.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, I'm done.
And you know what I found was so amazing when you were telling the story is that, because we all know that Jesus would, if he had asked Christ to forgive him at that point, that he would have forgiven him. And he could have
Would.
been like you said, the thief on the cross,
Yeah,
you know. But
yeah. He went to the wrong people. You know, and remember, as we said, he didn't say, we have sinned, which he could have said, which would have been true too, actually, you know, with the chief priest and the Sanhedrin, but he said, I have sinned. He owns it. He owns it. But it doesn't, he doesn't own it as sin against God. So,
But sorry, Pastor. But it's also interesting that he gives it back, like you said. He goes to them, not to God, because he didn't really want real forgiveness. He just wanted to get the stigma off of him.
yeah,
Why would you go to them?
yeah. Yeah. Oh, they are the spiritual leaders of the country. No, but they're absolutely useless.
Yeah.
All right, Chloe, you want to read for us? All right, Philippians chapter 4. Well, let's read verses 5, just to pick up context there. Let's do 5 through 13.
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4, verses 5 to 13. Philippians.
Let your reasonableness be known to everyone when the word is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at length you have revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me.
Okay, thank you, Chloe. There we heard one of the main verses you'll hear over and over again. Verse 13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. The context will absolutely tell us what it means. It almost, whatever you hear is oftentimes not right. But let's backtrack a little. All right, I had to go back to 5 and read on. We're really going to look at verses 10 to 13 tonight. In 5, we were exhorted to let our gentleness be known to all men. 6, exhorted to not be anxious, with 7 as well. 8, exhorted to meditate on holy things. And in 9, we were exhorted to copy Paul. And that's what we looked at a few weeks ago before the other Paul, Pastor Fry, shared some of the Beatitudes with us. And just a recap on verse 9, Paul said, the things that you have learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do, and the God of peace will be with you. And so we see there the first thing to do is to do what they learned from Paul. And we went through, remember we did the exercise of going through the 4 chapters of Philippians and all the things that Paul had taught them, right? To approve the things that are excellent, to rejoice that the gospel is preached, rejoice in trials and suffering for the gospel's sake, desire to be with the Lord even over this life, right? To live as Christ, live for Him, further the gospel, live so Christ will be magnified in your body, and on and on and on. There were like 25 that we talked about. And so he taught them much about the Christian life and how to think. And then the second thing on Paul's to-do list is do what you have received, and we said that means that you believe something in your inner man. It's one thing to be told something, but it's quite another to actually own that something, where you receive it, right? Where it's impressed upon your heart, and it moves you. So it's not only information, and that's not just a learning thing, but that learning thing becomes like a life thing, right? It becomes how you live. And so what you have received, do those things. The third thing on his to-do list was do what you have heard, and that was basically, that they have heard about Paul from others, from other churches, from other saints. They heard how he dealt with the saints in Rome, how he dealt with the Colossians, the Corinthians, the Galatians, to name a few. I am sure they heard much about his life and his ministry. They would have heard about his dealings with the Jews and the Judaizers. In just about every city he went into, he was basically, persecuted and on the run because of, Jews, the Jews who were persecuted, sometimes the Gentiles as well. And so they'd heard about him. They'd heard about his life. They'd heard about, the way he operated. And he said, well, what you heard, do. And then lastly, the fourth thing on his to-do list was, he goes, do what you have seen. And that means what you have personally seen. He has spent time with them. They have met him. You've seen his conduct and his character, how he orders his life. You have personally witnessed things about him. And so what you've seen, follow. And we said also, it would seem like a very almost prideful, haughty statement to say, everything I have told you, everything I have written, everything you've heard about me, everything you see about me, well, do those things, right? We would be like, but of course Paul is saying, he's not bragging. He's a mature in the faith man. He says he's mature. He talks to the mature and to the weak. Listen, he's walking close. He knows he's not perfect. He says, I have not arrived, not yet. He knows he's not sinless. He knows he's not pure that way. But he knows he's growing, and he's continuing pressing forward for the prize. But he says, the way you see me, that's the kind of motivation in life you should have. All right? And so he's an excellent example. All right? And then the promise to all of that was in verse 9 at the end of it, and the God of peace will be with you. So do these things, follow these things, and the God of peace will be with you. All right? And we said from back in verse 7, the result of being thankful prayer was the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, and guard your hearts and your minds through the Lord. But now in verse 9, he says the results of obedience is the God of peace will be with you. All right? So we have the peace of God, and we have the God of peace. We have the peace of God, and we have the God of peace. All right? And so now we come to verses 10 to 13. And in here he's basically saying, learn to be content. Learn to be content. And he starts by thanking God and praising God for the Philippians' care for him in verse 10. Right? He says, but I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now, at last, your care for me has flourished again, though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity. All right? And what they've given him was a gift, and the gift was brought to Paul while he's in prison and was brought by Epaphroditus, as we read about in chapter 2. Now, Paul planted the church in Philippi. We read that back in Acts 16. And in 17, he went to Thessalonica and Berea, and the Philippians sent support to him while he was there. Later on, he goes to Athens and Corinth, and again, the Philippians send support to him when he's there. But it seems as though there's a period, and we don't know how long, some commentators think about 10 years or so, where they're not able to support him anymore, for whatever reason. And now, while in prison in Rome, they're sending support again. They're sending support again. And Paul is thankful. And listen, he's not upset. He's not disappointed, right? In fact, he rejoices because he knows they have always cared for him, but they just lacked opportunity to support him. So he's not like, oh, I can't believe these guys have, like fallen off the map on supporting me for the last however many years, right? But what he will do now is teach a very valuable truth, and that is contentment. He's going to use their giving. He's thankful for their giving, but he's going to use their giving as to teach this very necessary Christian truth of contentment. And it is very necessary. And the reason why it's so valuable is because the peace of God and unity and rejoicing in the Lord and gentleness, it's all tied to it. Hey, brother.
Hey. How's it going?
Everybody say hello to Michael Minot.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Michael.
That's what I say every morning. I look in the mirror. Hi, Michael Minor. I'm looking older and uglier every day.
All right, so basically, everything that's come before in verses 5 to 9. Hi, Jolena. Everything that's come before it. Everybody say hi, Jolena.
Hi, Jolena.
All right.
Thank you for sharing your pizza.
Everything that's come before it is tied to contentment. Where there's no contentment, those things are going to be lacking. All right, peace, joy, gentleness, all of that stuff. All right, so question. What is contentment? What is contentment? Yes, Marie.
A feeling of being happy, happiness.
Happiness, okay. Ladies first.
I was going to say, like, being satisfied with what you already have.
Being satisfied with what you already have. Good, good, good. Glowing and Dan.
Being joyful regardless of your circumstances.
Being joyful regardless of circumstances. Dan.
It's an inner calm.
An inner calm. All good stuff. All right. All good stuff. I wrote down a lot of things that you guys said. Being happy, good, in whatever state, circumstance you were in. Here's the biblical definition of contentment. An inner sense of rest or peace that comes from being right with God and knowing He's in control of all that happens to you. So, Dan, there's that inner sense thing. All
I
right?
had one word right.
I'll repeat that. An inner sense of rest or peace that comes from being right with God and knowing He's in control of all that happens to you. All right, so the Puritan Jeremiah Burroughs said it this way. He said, "It is that sweet inward quiet, that gracious frame of spirit which freely submits to and delights in God's wise and fatherly disposal in every condition." All right, in other words, when what you guys say, every circumstance you are content, you're at rest and at peace that God's in control of this thing. All right, now, are people basically content, and how do you know if they are or they aren't?
Which people?
They're not content.
In general, just people, the world we live in.
No.
I hear people complain about the weather all day, every day. So they're not content, at least about the weather.
All right, they're not content. There you go. All right.
I would say commercials. I mean, it's always gravitating towards you need this, you need that. You know?
All right. Those bad advertising people, I agree. All right. Hey, listen.
Since you retired.
People complain all the time, whether it's their job or their relations or their living situation or their financial situation.
Or commuting.
Commuting, and we just find a reason.
The glass is half empty all the time. We know those kind of people. Maybe we're those kind of people at times.
Mabel
All right. Yes, Mabel.
I was going to say, and we're always chasing after the next thing.
All right.
We're never satisfied with what we have. We're always...
That's why people change jobs every 3 years, supposedly. They move every couple of years. The average marriage only lasts about 7 years because you become discontent. That's why people play lotteries, gamble, why people are in such debt, why many have multitudes of sexual partners, and on and on and on. They're not content. I'm tired of this thing.
Yeah.
I need something new. I need something more exciting. This is old. All right? They're not content. They bought into the lie that says man's chief end is to satisfy himself. That's man's chief end, satisfy himself. And this goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Right? Right? How were Adam and Eve not content?
They weren't content with how God had made them in the position that God had given them.
Yeah, that's right. They thought God was holding out on something. It was something that some knowledge He wasn't giving them. Right? They weren't content with all they had, and they had a lot. Right? They were unbelievably blessed, but they weren't content. All right? They wanted to be their own God. They didn't want to follow God anymore. They wanted to do it themselves. Howard Hughes, the multimillionaire many years ago, was asked what would make him content, and his answer was $1 more. Just one more. That would make him content. Now, what are people in the church today not content with? Now let's talk about us in general. We talked about the world. It's not good out there. But how about, like, church people?
I know I'm supposed to serve, and I know I'm just supposed to love God, but what is my purpose? oh, should I be a deacon? Should I be a pastor? And it's just a discontent with just coming and worshiping God. But you want to have this. They want levels and gifts and spiritual gifts, and not being content with just being saved.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. How else would we not be content?
A lot of believers are not content with how immature the other believers around them are.
There's a big disunity one for you right there.
Right.
Yeah. All right. And then even in the ways of the regular world around us, right? Some of us are not content with our lots in life. We're not content with sickness, lack of money, not having what others have. Here's one that may sting a few. Not content with being single. Right? If God has made us that way or put us in that position at this time, right? We're not content with being married to the person you're married to. Because someone else has got something better and you don't have that. Right? And so we're just like everyone else in many ways. Right? This is why there are so many TV evangelists and ministries that are flourishing this day, because they tell people things that they want to hear. I want to be well off financially. I want to have good things. I want blessings to keep coming on me, whatever that means.
They promise you that. They promise you prosperity.
They promise you prosperity.
And that's not even true.
Yeah, well, you have to first have faith and give your money to them.
Right.
And then, if you have enough faith, some of it's going to be coming back your way. Yeah, it's that whole seed thing. You throw down 10 and 1,000 comes back. I know, and it doesn't work. All right, so it just makes the guy collecting the seeds a whole lot wealthier. All right, so that's why they flourish, because people aren't content. Right? We're not content with our, the physical frailties that we have, the relational struggles that we have. Not that these are easy, right? But they're not content. Right? Hebrews 13:5, we're told, be content with such things as you have. Be content. Well, in verses 11 and 12, Paul said basically he went to school, the school of contentment, which means he had to learn it. He learned contentment. Somebody read verses 11 and 12 again. Of Philippians 4.
I can read that. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. Which in 12 you said?
Yes.
I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want.
Thank you. All right, and what he means is that the contentment is not something that he or any of us are actually endowed with at salvation. All right, it's something that we learn. It's not a natural disposition to us. It's not something you learn by going to Bible school. And now I learn contentment. It's not something you learn by reading books or by coming to a Bible study. Right? It is learned through life experiences usually. That's how we learn contentment. We have to go through stuff. Right? And Paul did not know Christian contentment when he was converted on the road to Damascus. He didn't all of a sudden get saved and bingo, he's a content man. Right? He had to go through some stuff. He learned it over the next couple of decades. When he's writing it now, he has learned it, and he's learned it well, and he's going to tell us how he learned it. He learned it, he says, through many trials. Did I give you guys 2 Corinthians 6, 4-5?
Yes.
Could somebody please read that?
But in all things we commend ourselves as ministers of God, in much patience, and tribulations, and needs, and distresses, and strifes, and imprisonments, and tumults, and labors, and sleeplessness, and fastings.
Look at that list.
So hard.
That is a long, hard list there. And he says, we commend ourselves as ministers of God in much, and boom, 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 boom. Right? I mean, and he gives you the laundry list. And somebody read 2 Corinthians 11:26.
In journeys often, perils of waters, and perils of robbers, and perils of my own countrymen, and perils of the Gentiles, and the perils in the city, and the perils in the wilderness, and the perils in the sea, and the perils among false brethren.
All right, just as an aside, if somebody would have said, well, you know what, become a Christian, and you will suffer for Christ's sake, and be bold about your faith, and I guarantee you are going to have a hard time with the people around you. They're going to make it hard for you, right? If somebody were reading this thing, in journeys often perils of robbers and water and countrymen and right, you would say, wow, Do I want to sign up for this? Do I want in? Well, he learned contentment,
Yeah.
right? Did it stop him from furthering the gospel?
No.
Did it stop him from seeking Christ with all his heart, and from doing and suffering all things for the sake of the elect? Right? He forged forward, and so too with us. I mean, we're not apostles doing what he did, but we're Christians commanded to live for Christ and to go forward with the gospel in our lives. Right? So he learned contentment by being incarcerated for 4 years for preaching the gospel. Right? And he learned it by being chased from city to city by bloodthirsty Jews and sometimes bloodthirsty Gentiles. Right? And he learned it by being slandered and falsely accused often. And he learned it by being chained to a Roman guard 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2 years. Like non-stop, being chained to, and that chain was only about 4 or 5 feet long. All right, he learned it. All right, and what he learned through all of these things was this. Here it is. Christ is enough. He learned that Christ is enough. And he learned that God had so ordered his circumstances that he had a good and wise reason for it. He had a good and wise reason for it. Right? And they were exactly what a sovereign God wanted in his life. There weren't mistakes. There weren't, things out of control. He knew that God was in control. Listen, if you don't believe in the sovereignty of God, you will be a basket case when all kinds of things hit you. Right? But he knew that God was in control. So he focused on what he should be as opposed to what he should have. Right? What he should be as opposed to what he should have. And what should he be? Question. What should he be that he was focused on?
Content.
Say it again.
He said he should be content.
He should be content. And what else should he be as he's
Joyful.
joyful,
I would say trusting.
trusting, obedient, fulfill the commission that the Lord had given him, right? Do all things for the sake of the elect, right? He was told to go he was an apostle to the Gentiles. He was given a commission by Christ, right? And he was obedient to it. He was obedient to it. So he learned that God was sovereign, and he lived like it. He lived like God was sovereign. Right? He learned that God's will was good, and that it was perfect, and it was acceptable, whatever it was. And he lived like it. Remember Jesus praying in the garden? Right? Take it away, take it away, take it away. If it be your will, take this cup away. Maybe there's another way. I can redeem men without having to actually suffer the wrath of God for the sins of his people. Maybe there's another way, but there's not another way. Your will be done, not my will be done. All right? He learned that God's will was good and perfect and acceptable. He learned beyond a shadow of a doubt that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. And he lived like that. He lived like God was sovereign. To not live like he's sovereign is, I can't believe this happened. Why does this happen to me? Lord, don't you know that I've got to do this thing? Where are we going to get the money now? I can't believe I got this bum leg, and I got to run a race, and whatever. Yeah. Right? He doesn't do that. Whatever God gave him, he's content with. No complaining, no disappointments, no trying to strong on God in prayer to get him to reconsider his provisions or lack of. Ultimately, he learned what you and I desperately need to learn, and that is to apply the cross of Jesus to our ambitions and our desires. Apply the cross of Jesus to our ambitions and our desires.
Apply the cross of Jesus to our...
All right. When a trial or even an advantage comes our way, we need to view it in light of the cross. When anything happens in our life, how are we to think? How are we to act in this situation in light of Christ and Christ crucified and Christ resurrected? How are we to respond? How are we to think? Right? How does what we do? Hey John, how is what we do in this thing bring glory to God? How does it? Right? How does this exalt the gospel? Listen to this. Right? Remember in chapter 1 of Philippians, Paul says, listen guys, I know you're upset. He's telling the Philippians, I know you're upset that I, the apostle to the Gentiles, am locked up under lock and key in a prison in Rome. But guess what? Guess what God has done with this? Right? He has furthered the gospel. He has furthered the gospel. So Paul is content. He said, listen, this is not a bad thing. God has willed it. In fact, it's being advanced and it's penetrating the heart of the world, which would be Rome, and even in Caesar's household, as we see at the end of chapter 4. All right? And so he's content. Right? Listen, he hears that guys are preaching the gospel to actually add affliction to his chain, right? Trying to stick it to him. There are guys that are jealous and envious of him. And does Paul get all huffed up? Does he throw down the apostolic gauntlet and do those guys in? No, what does he say? Whether they preach it in pretense or in truth, all I could say is, I thank God the gospel's being preached. He's content. He's content. He's content. He's not looking out for himself. He's content. All right? So he learned to be content, and he learned it by practicing the principle of self-denial and dying to self. All right? He practiced the principle of self-denial and dying to self. And he uses the word learned. He said, I have learned. Right? And he used it in verse 12, and he used it before in verse, in verse 10 or 9. In verse 9, which you've learned. But it's a different word this time. Right? It's a different word this time. He said, everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry. And this word literally means to learn the secret of something. It's to uncover some hidden truth. It's to learn the secret of something. And what Paul is saying is that he has learned the secret of contentment through his trials and through his sufferings and even through his prosperity at times. Right? He learned that God's desire for his people is that they would not be content with this world or cheap imitations of the things of God, but in Him and Him alone. Therefore, He will wean us from our dependence on the world's delicacies. All right? And so therefore, every believer, including us right now, we're in this school. Right? We are in this school, and our teachers vary. We're all different kinds of teachers, right? Different kinds of teachers teaching us in life contentment. We all have different situations, do we not? All right. Now, who or what are our teachers helping us to learn to be content? What are the teachers or the tools that God is using to help us learn to be content?
The people that rub us the wrong way.
We got some people that rub us the wrong way?
Or enemies, or people who don't.
Enemies? Okay.
Family members, unsafe family members. I shared with Claudia and a couple of the women how I too started getting resentments because of the way I was being treated. And I had to be reminded that I can't do that. I'm a Christian. I have to not do that. I have to love on them because they're not saved. They're not going to be like we're going to be. So I have to behave in such a way that would emulate the Lord, not be caught up with the flesh.
And it's not hard to get there.
It's so hard.
Right, family members.
I would just say in circumstances, things that are taken away from you, and you're learning to live without it, and you find joy in it.
Yeah, it's kind of like Jonah gets upset when the gourd grows over him, and the next day it's gone. Complains and is angry, right? I mean, listen. I'm sorry. Yes, John.
I can't think of the biblical term, but it's one of the attributes. God doesn't have to come to the place where you are. He doesn't have to find you. I can't think of the word now, but He's there.
He's always. I am with you always. I am with you always.
Omnipresence?
Omnipresence.
Yeah.
His omnipresence.
Yeah. Yeah. So He's with us. Circumstances. How about when all of a sudden there's some sort of pain or frailty in the body which we didn't have before? Right? All of a sudden you're like, oh man, I can't believe I've got like a bum thyroid. Well, all my sugar's bad now. Now I have to live, like watching my sugar or whatever. right? And the older we get, I'm telling you, those things are going to mount up. You know, there's only a few people here who could get that, but we do.
Yeah.
All right, and so how about that? How about financial hardship? You just keep spinning your wheels, but you never seem to be able to make ends meet and get ahead, and you're always behind the eight ball, so to speak. Could be that. Persecution, clearly. You share your faith and, you get kicked out of something or you don't get something. All right. Hard relationships. Some people are married to someone, and it's not easy. An unsaved spouse is not easy in some cases. Sometimes it's very hard sometimes. All right. Unsaved parents, children, all that could be really tough. Siblings. Unyielding boss. Work for somebody that's, micromanager. Or they stick it to you, right? And on and on and on. There's all kinds of schoolmasters, if you will, right, to help teach us. And we're all in school. We're all learning to come to the place of reliance on God for everything and in everything. But some of us are doing good in some of these with these teachers, and some of us are not doing so good with some of these teachers. We're not learning the lessons that are put before us, or we're not paying attention. So we need to be retaught. You understand, God is going to teach us. They just keep coming. They're not going to go away. We can kick and scream, and we can fight and buck, or we could say, Lord, you're in control. And at the end of the day, either he's in control or he isn't. Like, I have been beaten down because I am a very stubborn individual. And a proverb that has been absolutely critical for me, because I get I'm very linear, very anal, very task-driven. I have in my schedule whatever I'm going to do. You know what I'm going to say. And if something throws a monkey wrench into that, I get upset. And I'm like, oh, I can't believe it. I was going to do this. I was going to do that. I got to do this. And I have learned, because I've been beaten down and I've seen it as sin, that man plans his ways, but the Lord, he directs his steps. So if I say I believe God is sovereign and things shift and change, did not the sovereign God ordain that? So should I be upset with that? Well, I was. But I am learning not to be. And just trust him that, if we're going to go all the way to the right, then let's go to the right. You know what I mean? This is the way we got to go. All right. And so the list is long, but there are many teachers, if you will, to help us, and we need to learn. And we need to become content and trust that God is in control. And it's not haphazard, right? We see that even Jesus going to the cross. We're in Matthew 27 now. And Matthew and the gospel writers are very clear to tell us God is in control. Jesus is in control. He is no victim. This isn't a haphazard thing. You know what? The Jewish leaders haven't pulled a fast one. Judas didn't skirt around and, all of a sudden, unbeknownst to everybody, betray Jesus. Jesus told him he was going to do it. He knew it all the way back from John 6 he was going to do it. Right? It is all orchestrated. It's prophesied. Jesus knows it. He is controlling it all. It is all on his timetable, because it's all on God's timetable.
And I would say also, wouldn't you say godly advice from mature believers is another schoolmaster where
Absolutely.
they tell you, hey, watch out, it happens, and then you kind of learn through that experience as well.
Yes.
Okay, I should listen to the people of God because they know.
Yeah. Yeah. And even in just in the world in general, I don't know about you guys, but when I was young, my father didn't know anything. And then when I got into my 30s, I said, he was a pretty smart guy in a lot of ways. I would never listen to anything he said. And then later on, I'm saying what he said. But you're right. Wisdom and counsel. Yeah. All right. Well, in verses 11 and 12, we see the scope of Paul's contentment, and the scope is in whatever state I am in. In whatever state I am in. And what circumstances was Paul in? All right, you guys fill this in for me. What circumstances was he in? Just from verses 11 and 12.
Well, he was in prison
Okay.
at this time.
Yes, he was. All right.
He didn't have anything.
He didn't have anything. But read verse, I think, 12. And tell me what state he was in.
He was hungry.
Okay. Good.
Also full.
Full, hungry, abounding, suffering need, rich, poor. All right? And And abased, by the way, means to live on next to nothing. Right? It means to live really, really low. In other words, Paul knew how to live like a homeless guy. He knew how to live in an impoverished state. He could have nothing. He was content to sleep on a cold prison slab floor with shackles around his hands and his feet. Remember in, I think it's Acts 16, that he and Silas, yes, Glo?
Oh, you can finish your thought.
Oh, thank you. That he and Silas, they've been beaten, they've been flogged, they're chained in some dungeon in is it Philippi? Philippi, thank you. And what are they doing? Are they crying and complaining and moaning and groaning because the beating they took? What are they doing? They're singing. They are praising God. They are praising God and singing. That's contentment, right? All right. So how is, what state is Paul in? All right. What state is he in? Like share with me some of the ways that he has been, in great turmoil.
Well, there are people who turn against him.
All right.
You mentioned some people that used to walk with him that don't walk with him anymore, who actually are causing more pain for him. They're purposely hurting him.
All right. All right.
Also, when he was in jail, there were times when the brothers could get to him and bring him things that he needed, so he was, I guess, full.
Yep.
And there were other times when they couldn't, probably for months,
Yeah.
bring him anything.
Right. Amen. Right. He spent, we know, 3 days shipwrecked in the deep. He was content. He was content whether he had an old pair of sandals or no sandals at all. If he already had brand new sandals, he was content. Right. He was also content when he abounded. So when he had nothing, he was content. When he was like living on next to nothing, he was content. And when he had much, he was content as well. Which means that when he had more than enough or more than he needed, he was content. And I'm going to tell you something. We'll talk about it in a second. It's not easy to be content with much. Sometimes it's hard, actually. The word picture for abounded, by the way, is a river that is overflowing its banks. That's the word picture in the Greek. So what Paul is saying is that he knew how to handle prosperity. He knew how to handle the good times when things when there was much. And the truth is, as I said, most people don't really know how to do that. They either hoard it, or they blow it on themselves, or they use it foolishly, but they're not really kingdom-minded with it. Oh, man, we made some extra, I got some extra dough. All right, I get a new this and a new that, and I need this, and I want to get that, and I want to go here, and we go to vacation. Right? But they're not kingdom-minded. Right? I am sure that Paul's resources all went into the kingdom. He labored with his own hands, right? He was a tent maker, and he helped others as well. Right? So he was very kingdom-minded. Reminds me of well, I'll get into it in a second. All right, and this is why, by the way, people not being content. Some people playing lottery, but so many lottery winners that you read over the years, what do they go? They go broke because they think, oh man, I want all this money, and they buy this, they buy that, they buy the house, they buy the yacht.
I read a story where the guy had the money, he got divorced over the money, and then he pushed everyone away because he thought everyone was trying to get his money, and he ended up living in a hotel with his friend, and he was homeless because he pushed everyone away, thinking they were trying to take the money, and he ended up having no money at the end.
And the worst of all, I'm sorry, Glo.
We met a guy when we were in Georgia this past week who he had been a businessman in the city, and he realized in his 40s that he had just done nothing for himself, and the only people that were around him wanted his money. And so he basically left his family, left everyone, went down to Florida, did drugs for 10 years straight, and now he's homeless and getting services at this Christian center. And he was just he was done living, he was looking for something to fill himself, and he was done living for other people and making, this money, and he had made all of the money that he thought that he needed in life, and now he's homeless.
A lot of sad stories like that. And the worst part of it all is, most people who become prosperous, they're not thankful. Right? They're not thankful to the God who has given them whatever they have anyway. Instead, they put their trust in those riches or or in their own abilities. I'm so smart, I work so hard, I'm such a wheeler dealer, boy, I know how to play the market, whatever it is, right? And they're constantly worried about losing it anyway. You know, I mean, I've known guys, man, they're like, they play the market every day. They live and die by like, you know, like a percentage of a percentage, like on a Monday morning, you know, and they're a slave to it, right? Well, one of the reasons that God gives much to some is so that they would give much to others. Right? One of the reasons he gives much to some is so that they would give much to others. Charles Spurgeon actually was a very wealthy man. You know, preacher in the 1800s, Metropolitan Tabernacle, preached for like 38 years. And he made a fortune on selling his sermons that they would translate into different languages and send all over the world, actually, and books and stuff. I mean, he never took a salary from the Metropolitan Tabernacle. And he was preaching, you know, for 38 years to like between 5,000 and 10,000 people a week. Probably like 4, 5, 6, 8, 7 times a week, that and other places. And he made all this money, so he never took a salary from the church for 38 years. But he died with nothing. Because he had started and was the head of like 56 different ministries. From orphanages to pastors' colleges and all other kinds of stuff. And he basically put all his money into all of that. And so he died with nothing. Like he left nobody anything. Because all of it went into the kingdom. Right? He used his money for the kingdom. Right? And he died a rich man then. Right? He died a rich man. And many other stories like that as well. Right? Well, Paul adds that he's content, and that he's content whether he's full or whether he's hungry. And full literally means, it's like this. It was a word that they would force feed animals, right, for the purpose of getting them fat. So they would force them to eat, you know. So that's what he's saying there, right? And hungry, of course, means to go without food. And Paul was content in either extreme, right? He's content if he has filet mignon or if he has moldy bread. You know, I mean, he's content either way. He's content if he's sleeping on a rock for his pillow, or he's got a fluffy pillow of duck feathers. He's content either way. It can go either way. He's content. Whatever the extreme is, he's content. Now, why is this? Why is this contentment of extreme so hard for us? Why is it not easy for us? Yes, Marie?
Because we use modern thing.
We're used to modern things? Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
We're focused on the now, and so things are good. They can always be good. If they're bad, it's continuing to be bad, and we never see this long view of life.
Okay.
Always comparing.
Say it again?
Always comparing ourselves to others.
All right, we're comparing.
Because of those people in advertising.
Say it again?
Because of the people in advertising.
Yep.
People in advertising, I blame them for about 80% of the world's problems.
Our expectations are wrong.
Our expectations are wrong. All right, good. I actually wrote that down, false expectations. Yeah. How about this? We think we're owed these things. Like they're our inalienable right to have like 2 pillows on our bed. You know, our inalienable right to have meat 3 times a week. Well, whatever it is. You know, and so we think we're owed these things. Right? It's just, you know, it's what we should have. Like, why shouldn't we have those things?
Yeah.
Right? And we struggle if we go from a filet mignon to like a cheeseburger. Oh, that's a big hit there. You know? We would struggle with that. You know, if we go from microwave to letting a piece of meat thaw out for 6 hours, we're upset. I gotta wait 8 hours for this thing to thaw from the freezer, right? No, man, we don't like that. Hey, listen, we're upset if we have to grate our own cheese. Oh, I gotta get this block now and do this thing, right? And so we think we're owed these blessings and conveniences that we are afforded. Right? And we struggle if just about anything changes our standard of living. Right? It is not easy for us to go from a 3-bedroom house to a 1-bedroom house. That's like a death blow for some of us. You know, or to go from driving a car to have to take a bus. You know, or from going to eating, you know, roast beef sandwiches to bologna sandwiches. You know, and so whatever it is, right? For us it's not so easy. For us it's not so easy. And believe it or not, we even struggle when we come into great gain, which is why we're warned in Psalm 62:10, if riches increase, do not set your heart on them. I can handle it, man. Just give me more and I can handle it. But no, they're not so easy. And why is this? Because we do set our hearts on these things, right? And they go from on God to look at these things I have. Look at this nice life I'm living. Look at this cushy, cozy situation that we have going on here. Right? It is easy to do that. It is easy to do that. Spurgeon said this: when men have much of God's providential mercies, it often happens they have but little of His grace and little gratitude for the bounties they have received. I'll read that again. When men have much of God's providential mercies, which most of us do, right? It often happens they have but little of His grace and little gratitude for the bounties they have received. Right? An example of this would be King Ahab of Israel. Right? Remember him? He lived in the king's palace. He owned lots of stuff. He owned lots of land. He was the king. He could do what he wanted. But he wanted Naboth's plot of land, this little plot of land that Naboth had. He wanted it so he could grow his vegetables on it. Oh, look at that. Would be a nice place for my vegetables. Right? It'd be like me saying, oh, you know what? I want to own Glenn's house. It'd be a nice place for me to go and put my feet up once in a while. Right? And so we're just going to get rid of everybody there. But so he says, you know what? I want to grow my vegetables. So what does he do? He asked Naboth for it. Naboth said, I'm not going to sell it to you. No, this is a family plot. This is our inheritance. We're not going to give it away. And so what does Ahab do? Well, his wife Jezebel, concocts this thing, but they ends up killing him. They end up killing him, and then he takes it. He takes what's not his. Therefore, and there are many other examples, but we need to be content with what God gives us today, whatever it is. And we must be content with the basic things in life. Somebody read 1 Timothy 6:8.
And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content.
Now I think added to this would be, shelter would be in food and clothing. But he's saying is, be content with the necessities. Be content that I give you the necessities. Anything else is gravy. It's just God is pleased to bless you with it. But he could take it away. Right? Remember what it said in Proverbs 30, I think it's verse 8? Anyone know what I'm saying there? Don't give me riches, don't give me poverty. Who knows that? Somebody can find that? Proverbs 30, I think it's like verses 7, 8, and 9. He just says, give me what I need. Give me my basic what I need so I don't rob or forget you or something. All right, 8 and 9. Oh, wait, 7, 8, 9. Okay, Glenn, got it?
No, I stopped.
Proverbs 7, 8, and 9.
2 things
30,
I ask
7,
of
8,
you,
9.
Lord. Do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise I may have shown too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? So I become poor and steal, and so dishonor the name of my God.
All right, there you go. Don't give me poverty, Lord, and please don't give me prosperity. Don't give me riches, because either way, I'll lose focus of you. All right, and so I mean, there's a reality there. All right, so having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. All right, if He gives us more, we praise Him for it. If He takes stuff away from us, we praise Him for it. Hebrews 13:5 again says, "Be content with such things as you have." That means whatever I have, be content. That means I'm not envying and coveting what Michael Minot has, if he has more than me. All right, I'm content with what I have. Even though my car might be the oldest jalopy on the block, I should be content with it because I have it and God has given it. Right? All right. We should come to the point where we're so good with what God gives and what He's doing that we could say, like Paul, all right, for our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. That I'm just, I'm just passing through. Right? This is not my final home. And whatever He gives, I'm good. Whatever scenario is, He's put me in it. It's only for a season, because the season will end, and then He's going to take me home. Well, in verse 13, Paul gives the source of his contentment. He says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, before we look at this, I want you guys to tell me the kinds of things you've heard on that verse, because it runs the gamut.
I can do a wrestling match.
All right, I can do a wrestling match. What else have you heard? It's on so many like sports guys. It's on their helmets. You know what I mean? It's on people's. They tattoo it, right? But I don't think they know what it means because it's sitting in the context of contentment. All right. All right. So you read a lot of stuff. You hear a lot of stuff. It's people's life verses, but I don't think they grasp it all, totally. All right. Paul got his strength to be content in all things from Christ. Right? And all things does not mean that Paul can go without food for 50 days. Does not mean that he can take 500 lashes and a scourging and still survive. All right? Does not mean that he can leap tall buildings in a single bound. It doesn't mean any of those things. All right? But what it does mean is that he can do verses 11 and 12, everything in there, because Christ strengthens him. Christians have no strength in and of themselves to follow God, to obey God, and to please God. We do not have the strength to be content in every situation. We don't have it. It is not in us. Right? Our sin natures will not allow it. Right? We're prone the other way. We do not have the strength to persevere or to battle against spiritual foes. We don't have it. But with Christ strengthening us, we can and we do. Right? This is why Paul desired to know the power of Christ's resurrection in this life. He wants to know it. In other words, he wants resurrection power, the power that resurrected Christ from the grave. He gives us, it's available to us. Why? So that we could do miraculous things? No. So that we could live for him. So that we could live Godward lives in a godless world. And in flesh that doesn't want to do it. That's why. That's why. Therefore, there is no sin that we cannot overcome. I can't overcome that one, man. No way. I'm just, this is how I am. I'm just, just me and girls, man. I can't help me. God made them for me to look at. Well, you can overcome it. We can overcome it with his strength. And there are definitely some sins that come from being discontent. You understand that? Name me sins that would come from being discontent.
Covetousness.
What's that?
Covetousness.
Coveting? Yes. All right. I'll throw greed in there as well. All right. What else? Say it again. Complaining, big one. Lust. Selfishness, anger, wrath, pride, right? And then probably a whole bunch more, right? That's from not being content. Unbelief. Lying. The list is long.
In other words.
Say it again.
All of them, in other words.
All of them. Or as the Jews would say, all 600, whatever it was of them. Yeah. All right. They broke them all. All right. So contentment is a remedy for much sin. It really is if you think about it. If you think about the things that bother you in some cases, if you were content in areas that you're not content now, you probably wouldn't be sinning in those areas. Right? Having anxiety, anger, right? Wanting vengeance, coveting, envy, greed, jealousy, right? What it does, it puts us in a place that David was in, who said, "The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want." The Lord will provide; He'll take care of me. Puts us in a place where the place that Ahaz was, where he said, "Whom have I in heaven but you? And there is none upon the earth that I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." See, he wants us to want him. And he wants us to find our satisfaction in him. Right? There's no hardship that we can go through that we cannot glorify God in through Christ's strength. Right? So the command to glorify God is across the board in every scenario. We glorify him in a hard marriage. We glorify him in a really tough work scenario. We can glorify him in any scenario, and he gives us the grace to do so. Right? Now, this does not mean that he will take away trouble or even fix it, but instead he'll give us the grace to be content with it. He'll give us the grace to be content with it. He'll give us his peace. Right? And how is that? Because we'll be convinced that he's sovereign. We'll be convinced that his sovereign hand has given this. All right? And I think, because I counsel a lot of couples, married couples, and And if you really believe that your spouse is God-given to you, with all of the warts and blemishes that they have, and guess what? You do too. But if you really believe that God has handpicked this one and is sovereignly given you this wife or husband, then it would cure a lot of ills in that relationship. It really would. You know what, Lord, you gave me him. And yeah, he's got a lot of issues. And I probably would change 50 or 60 things if I could, but I can't. And you made him this way.
Yeah.
And I thank you for him, or I thank you for her. Right? And I think in every scenario,